Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension podcast. I'm your host, Waxéla Sananda, and I'm so excited today to introduce you to Kelly Marie Kerr. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here, and I've been looking forward to this for a while. And your topic is well, all of your topics are amazing. So let me just share a little bit about what you're up to, and then we'll launch into it. Kelly Marie Kerr's books explore parallels between scripture and science about topics such as the sacred secretion, threefold enlightenment, great regeneration, Kundalini energy, and other alchemical mysteries such as the monthly seed. She is a diligent researcher, practitioner, and author in alchemy, spirituality, yoga, and other esoteric subjects. Kelly Marie always takes care to corroborate her findings with peer-reviewed science and the work of other credible published authors. And you have a number of books that I actually would love to read all of them when time permits. They all are fascinating topics that I know many of the listeners would love to dive into. Today, though, you have a new book out, and we're mostly going to focus on that. It's called The Sacred Seed, Your Complete Guide to Kundalini, Christ Oil, Alchemy, and the Monthly Seed. So that's a big topic to jump into, and something that, I think we've all heard of Kundalini energy. Some people may or may not have heard about Christ oil and the sacred secretion. So I'd love to start, since you're new here, to just you can share anything about, kind of what led you to this work and a little bit about yourself, and then let's dive into the sacred secretion.
Well, I was raised Christian, quite strict Christian. And as much as I kind of loved the faith and certain aspects of the faith in terms of like community and worship and those things, I always felt that there was something deeper that I couldn't answer, or that I couldn't quite put my finger on what was really missing. And I had a lot of big questions about the Bible, in particular, some of the stories, like Jonah being swallowed by a whale, and those sorts of stories. I just felt that I couldn't buy them on a literal level. And I was always very deeply into my literature and English language studies, and did all of those things as I was for my college studies and those sorts of things. So I was always reading like deeply symbolic texts and studying them as part of my journey kind of through life. And it never really occurred to me to look at the Bible in that way back then. But it's funny because how like the circle of life brought me back there eventually, when I was in a really deep phase of seeking, and I had become a yoga teacher. And my Christian friends were like, no, no, yoga's no good, yoga's the devil, all of these sorts of things. And, the dogma and the misunderstandings, like the muddy water that surrounds like those ideas. But I knew how much I loved yoga and what it meant to me in terms of like the clarity of mind, and like being able to process emotions, and even just on a physical like enjoyment level of stretching and toning the body as well. But I was just really having a time where I was getting lots of downloads of from spirit. As I mean, I still say, like, I still speak in Christian language in a way, but I kind of just understand everything to be so much more holistic now, in terms of like the terminology that are used for different things. But one of the things that came through to me was a scripture from Matthew 6:33, which is, seek ye first and all these things shall be added unto you. And I heard it whispered, and then I was seeing like oil going upwards, like on the walls, and having waking visions and like just intense, visceral dreams where I would just wake up like, what's going on? What on earth does all of this mean? And there was a deep healing happening as well at the same time from, you know, some of the programming that I'd kind of been subject to through childhood. And, you know, everyone has their different traumas and different things that they're kind of processing. And I was starting to piece together the chakra system in the book of Revelation and getting lots of vivid images about the rainbow in the body and the 7 seals and the 7 candlesticks all being related to that book. But every time that I went to research it in an outward way, all I would find is, you know, no, the book of Revelation is about the end times. It's the book of the apocalypse, and, you know, all of these different things. And I would be like, that just doesn't add up to what like I'm experiencing or what I'm being given from, you know, God or from source, or, you know, however you prefer to call it. And so I carried on. I was just really seeking hard to kind of know or feel that last piece of the picture come in that would really, like, I don't know, kind of be the integrating piece, if you know what I mean. And then I had this really strange experience which I now know to be the Kundalini energy rising through my body, where I just felt crisscrosses of energy going all the way up my spine, and like my head just felt like it had been blasted open. I was just seeing like vision, like just flashing in front of my eyes, like nothing I could ever have imagined happening. Like, it still gives me goosebumps to talk about it, because it was just so profound and shocking to me that for a while I couldn't even tell anybody about it, because I was worried that they'd think that I had gone crazy. And as much as I was into yoga, the yoga that I was practicing at the time was the Ascension yoga, which was more to do with like mantra and meditating on scriptures and, you know, doing the physical postures as well. It wasn't to do with raising the Kundalini specifically, but that's what actually inadvertently happened from the culmination of all my practices. And I also decided to do a Daniel fast because I was still in church at the time, going regularly, you know, listening, being very diligent about, you know, what should I be doing, trying to, you know, just toe the line and be the best that I could be in that way. And the church were doing a fast together. So I was very clear in my body also. And so it was a mixture of the yoga, the fasting, the deep like meditations and seeking that all came together to give me this moment of just utter clarity and awakening, where when I stepped outside the next time, it felt like the trees were more green and the sky was more blue, and I could just feel love on me, like I was 5 years old and, you know, I was getting a hug from like a loved one, and it was just like all over my body, this love, like just absolutely incredible, such a wonderful gift. And from that moment, really, all of the writing and sharing and offerings that I've created over the last 8 or 9 years now have all been basically because of that kind of first moment of, wow, like this is it, we're all one, like, you know, what that says in Christianity, you know, they're using that terminology, but what they're saying over here in the yogas and the Eastern traditions, like, it's the same, but it's just different terminology. So, you know, some people call that kind of study syncretism. But then I know a lot of people kind of shy away when they hear that word, so I don't tend to use that word. But my studies and books are a form of syncretism in a way, but more like in a kind of practical form, I guess. And then where the sacred secretion came in on the journey was because I realized that the biblical Christian way of saying that the Kundalini has risen is that you've risen the Christ oil, you've preserved your chrism, your light energy, and you know that's what's caused your anointing on the inside. You know, we see priests pouring oil on babies, and you know, people going to be baptized and being submerged in water, which are all lovely rituals, but they symbolize something. They symbolize the alchemy that is truly happening within us, that is actually improving our DNA signals and waking up our billions of cells. Like, it's just incredible. I never thought that I would be sharing in the way that I do now. Like, I didn't think this in a million years would be my path. It's just blown my mind. But that now I feel like there's nothing else I could ever do, because actually this was always supposed to be it. But it took that kind of deep focused seeking and wanting to know God, to know love, to understand, why are we here, what are we here for, what is my purpose, why is there so much suffering, and I can't gain control over anything, and you know, but just being able to release all of that and just falling in love with self and other in the most simple way. That's what it is. It's like this all-encompassing love that just blows the doors off everything else that you've ever thought was possible.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that journey with us. There's so many things in there that I'd like to kind of dig into a little bit. You know, you referenced revelations and the relationship of the seven candles, the chakras, the rainbow. And I do want to talk about that, but maybe first, I'm not sure. We'll let you decide. It might be better to kind of break down. I also have a Christian history. I was raised in the Lutheran church, and I was also a seeker. And it's funny you mentioned that seeking verse. I had that on my wall when I had kind of just gotten my first home, and I was always a seeker. And we didn't always get permission in the church to go out and seek, like you said. So I can really relate to that, and that desire to know, the desire to know, you know, who we are and what is God and who is God. So to bring it back to the story of Jesus, and, you know, in the church, it's presented very much like this is exactly how it is. And Jesus lived and did these things and said these words. And then there are esoteric teachings that say that it's parables and metaphors, and that there's another meaning. So could you explain maybe first about the story of Jesus, and then from there we can move into the revelations and things.
Okay, well, the chemistry of Christ or Jesus in the body is that um, every month when the moon enters our sun sign, we have like a holy conception that's caused by a secretion coming in from the pineal and pituitary glands, which are the Mary and Joseph of the body. And together, their potencies form the Christ oil in the third ventricle. And that oil basically goes on a journey through the body. And I mean, I won't go into like all of the kind of science that backs this and all of the previous pioneer authors that, you know, back these things, because all of that information is available in my books. But just to highlight the fact that, you know, this isn't just me coming up with this. This is, you know, a very found, very validated, very true symbolism that, you know, many people have also had shared experiences and incredible testimonies about this happening to them as well, and understanding this kind of biblical alchemy. So it travels down the 33 vertebrae of the spine, which is equal to the 33 years that Christ lived for. And then the Christ seed is born in the manger. So the solar plexus is known as the bread basket, and that's equal to the basket, or to the manger where Jesus was born in Bethlehem. So that seed being born within us from these two potencies is what we have to preserve. And basically for that duration of the month, so for 3.5 days each month, that seed will be in the lower chakras of the body. So if we do certain practices that would waste it or diminish it in other ways, like through being too acidic, through having like emotional outbursts, because then the adrenals secrete certain hormones into the blood and into the CSF that completely dissolve the seed, and also through like sexual outlets as well, that will just basically diminish the potential for the seed to come back up on its journey through the heart center, which is equal to Jerusalem, through the throat chakra, which is where the wedding at Cana happens. Cana means reeds. That's where we have our vocal cords or reeds. And then as it comes back through, we have the crucifixion happening where the vagus nerve meets the cerebellum. And the cerebellum, to mystic Christians of old and to the Essenes, was known as the brain of enlightenment, because it's the part of our brain that runs our autonomic nervous system. So everything that we do without thinking, like our cells regenerating themselves, like our heart beating for us, like us just spontaneously taking breath in because we know on some level that we need to, even though we don't consciously think about doing it. So it rests in the cerebellum and then eventually blasts through the pineal and nitric oxide plays a part in that coming through the pineal as well. And then when the pituitary secretes its hormones of oxytocin and vasopressin, they actually stimulate pineal metabolism, which means the pineal upgrading its basic hormones such as serotonin and melatonin into what we call the biochemicals of enlightenment, which are pinealine, which is an incredible hormone of bliss. It's pinealine is an antibiotic, it's antimicrobic, it's so deeply healing, and it cleanses the waters of the body, so it gives us much more clarity in our third eye as well, in our dreams and visions. And we produce pinealine when we fast, so that's where that kind of element comes into the inner alchemy as well. And the other hormones of enlightenment, one of them is DMT, which a lot of people, it's more common that people have heard of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is a natural hallucinogenic. So again, you can really get in touch with your unity consciousness through DMT, because it helps illusions to dissolve in that chakra, so that it's not just kind of an effort of saying, oh, you know, I've read this, so I know this is true, but actually embodying it and experiencing it and realizing that illusions dissolving isn't just a nice turn of phrase. It's literally illusions dissolve and you realize that, you know, you are a star, you are a part of it all. So literally, you know, it's just absolutely magical. And then as the pineal and the pituitary harmonize in that way, it blasts the crown chakra open, which causes our CSF to actually multiply within us. And the CSF is part of the lymphatic system. Our lymphatic system is basically our light body, you know, hydrogen and oxygen coming together, keeping us clean, running every single function. There's nothing, the human body can't do any of its functioning without water, without the lymph. So yeah, it's just, I think I've given you a lot there, but hopefully it made...
Yeah, that's wonderful. A couple things I want to just get a little bit of clarity on. The seed you mentioned in the beginning, and it's how like the Mary and Joseph and, you know, the creating of the seed is, I get the potential and the spiritual and the, you know, the energetic component of that. Is there also a physical component to the seed?
Yes, so I mean, I believe through my research, and through the research of other people from hundreds of years ago, that the seed is actually our stem cells being born in the lymphatic system. And in the spleen specifically, which is where Jesus was stabbed when he was on the cross being crucified, we have multipotent stem cells being born there. And those stem cells, because they're multipotent, obviously they can regenerate. Our cerebellum will send them to wherever they need to go in the body to become whatever they need to become in order to regenerate us and heal us from the inside out. So it's like we're continuously shedding a layer, you know, like reptiles, like let off their old skin. It's like we are also doing that, but we're kind of unaware of that process. So by nurturing those cells that are born in the spleen each month, we actually improve our ability or our potential for regeneration, rejuvenation, you know, just having more energy and focus in general as well. Obviously, the way that some people speak about the sacred secretion in terms of like, you know, there's one seed and it's born, and then after 29 and a half days, this happens and this happens. I believe that the authors and doctors and researchers of old didn't have the same, or didn't, I'm not saying that science didn't exist, because obviously, you know, when we think about the pyramids and all of these like advanced technologies that did exist, I think it's very possible that people did know exactly what was happening in the body, but it wasn't public knowledge. So I believe that the parable of Jesus is just a way of them explaining it to each other through the Bible, Jesus explaining what was happening and how he was becoming Christed, because Christ isn't a name, you know, like Kelly, it's a title, it's like president or doctor. So he was just Jesus, but he became a Christ because he was anointed by this process.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And helpful to get a concept of. I love the stem cells that it's, because those are constantly regenerating. It's not like we just get one chance and they're gone. And I know that there are many practices that can be helpful in, everybody's probably listening to this saying, well, I want the rejuvenation and the regeneration and the beautiful, blissful, loving experience and the visions and the downloads and so what are some of the best practices that a normal person can do that's not master of this, or maybe is just hearing this for the first time? What types of things can be done to help somebody have these types of experiences?
I mean, first of all, alkalizing the body is going to go a long way towards opening the pineal gland and making sure that the entire glandular system, the endocrine system, is very clear and able to release all of its secretions that it's, because each chakra has a gland that it's associated with, and each gland secretes a different set of hormones. So chakra blockages are really about that gland on a physical level. It's about that gland going into overtime and secreting too much cortisol or too much something because it's trying to compensate for being in a state of stress or whatever for each person. But by realkalizing, we actually begin to reset the glandular system. So that's going to mean, reducing sugar intake, reducing meat intake, particularly processed meats are, terrible because they're full of hormones and antibiotics and different chemicals. I would say if you are going to eat meat, it should be organic and it should be, as good a quality as it can possibly be towards being natural. But the Daniel fast, which I was doing at the time when I had that first awakening, is a plant-based diet. So if you can go, for someone who's just starting out, I would say don't try and cut everything out overnight, but we each know, I think, our own level of clarity and where we're at in that way. So it's just a case of being honest with ourselves and saying, oh, I could probably reduce this, or I could probably, take in some more like fresh green juices or something. Like juice fasting is an amazing way to alkalize the body and still get all of the minerals that you need to build the molecules in your body that you really need for like health and vitality. So other than eating and drinking and not being acidic, it's keeping like the acidic thoughts and emotions at bay as well. And there's many ways to center ourselves and to come into a place where we can delete and let go of some of the things that are niggling us. Meditation is very cleansing for the mind. It makes space for new thoughts and new ideas to come, so we can let go of some of the old things that maybe trigger us. Yoga, again, is absolutely incredible for the lymphatic system and the glandular system. And those two, I mean, the whole body, I wouldn't want to leave a part of the body out because it's all so magical, but those two systems are really key in the great regeneration, because when they're balanced and working in harmony, that's on a really deep level of our being, just kind of beyond our atomic being. So everything else kind of has a knock-on effect from there. And that comes in line with the thoughts and emotions come in line with maintaining like a disposition of what the Kundalini rishis call bhakti, which is loving awareness. So in a biblical sense, we're looking at the compassion of Christ there, this transcending love and tolerance and patience for all things, in knowing that it's a part of you also, and it must be a reflection. If you're experiencing it out here, then there's something also happening inside as well that is parallel to that, and that by honoring that, we can transmute and dissolve certain things. I'm not saying that anybody should let a narcissist or somebody terrible ruin their lives because they're too kind and compassionate to tell them no, because honoring yourself and loving yourself is also about having the strength to say, how could you do that? I can't accept that. I can't accept that for me. And actually, part of our own inner love blossoming comes from us being able to say no, and we'll be tested in that way until we are able to say those no's, let our yeses be yes and our no's be no's, again in a biblical sense. So yeah, it's really part and parcel. It's a whole package of the physical side of eating and drinking, the mental, emotional side, and really having that heart chakra just glowing from the inside, of knowing our own worth and self-love. And oxytocin is a huge catalyst for all of the alchemies that happen through the glandular system of the body. So if anything, I would say that Bhakti and loving awareness is probably more important than even what you eat or drink. But it's, those things aren't going to hurt. That's only going to assist you in the process. And yeah, I think that's kind of the best way to sum it up. It's like body, mind, soul, and spirit, and honoring all of those elements and doing your best in that way.
Yeah, thank you. I know there are a lot of people that, and myself included, when there's a lot of information, it can sometimes be overwhelming to think, oh, I'm going to cut out meat and fast and, do all of these things. And then maybe, and sometimes that can even be more stressful than taking a more mild approach. And so I love that you brought in just being in that loving feeling can actually get you there. It was maybe more important than being rigid, I guess, about all of the ways of eating and being in the world. But one of the things I wanted to address with you is I saw that you had a video about alcohol and how naturally alcohol we think of as something to avoid and probably not the best thing to be indulging in when you're doing these practices. However, I also wanted to bring up, I've been a longtime student of Dr. Joe Dispenza and been to many of his retreats, and I've had many of these really powerful experiences, some at his retreats and some not at his retreats, which is certainly a Kundalini type of experience. And when I was particularly at Dr. Joe's events, there's just a lot of partying going on. Not saying I was partying, but I know I did have, a glass of wine with dinner, and some of them are at all inclusives. So there are, all kinds of opportunities to indulge, we'll just say, in all kinds of food and drink and things. And yet people are having these like all over the place. In a room of 1,500 people, you're going to have possibly a dozen or more a day having these experiences. And I know the energy is set for that. So I'd be curious to hear your perspective on that. How dogmatic are you when you're working with people about avoidance of alcohol and other substances that could maybe interfere?
Um, because I get so many people asking, what's the process, to be very specific about things. And because I also draw from a lot of ancient spiritual texts and what those spiritual beings, the rishis and the Buddhists of old, for example, the Essenes, all talk about, the what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to be too strong, but like, the potential dangers of, alcohol. And for me personally, I have just found that when I drink now, since my awakening, I don't like how I feel. I immediately can feel it, like in my legs, in my arms, like a heaviness, a kind of like an aversion to it. And I feel like that is my body saying, what on earth are you doing to me, to my cells, to myself? The liver specifically and the kidneys can't be in parasympathetic mode. They can't be in rest and digest mode when they're processing alcohol. So therefore, they're hindered in doing their normal function. They're putting all their effort into getting the alcohol out of the body as quickly as possible, rather than doing all the rejuvenating and regenerating that they would usually be focusing on. But I do have like a glass of wine or a beer with my husband when we're watching football from time to time, because that's life, and that's something that I enjoy occasionally. So I don't think it's about being like so 100% strict on yourself. And my good friend, who's a Kundalini teacher, has been to several of Joe Dispenza's retreats as well. She went to the London one, I think it was either last summer or the summer before, and she just couldn't believe the experiences that she had and how visceral and everything they were. And she also mentioned about like, we weren't getting up every morning and drinking juice. Like, it's not like a Kundalini retreat. It's completely different to that. And I think it's incredible what Joe Dispenza has tapped into, because the power of the heart and the brain together, working in unity, is just really what's happening to people in those moments. Like, by bringing that cohesion in, I think it's giving a lot of people that haven't experienced any of those kind of like shifts in consciousness or in chemistry before, something like a platform to kind of to go forwards on. And maybe in years to come, if they stay like on a spiritual path, maybe then they will experiment with fasting and other things, because fasting, for one thing, really does build DMT in the body. And DMT is just like one of the most blissful chemicals that we make endogenously. So to be able to self-produce that, regularly, that's only going to boost our health. And I believe that, thousands of years ago, we would have naturally been producing more, because there weren't so many stresses and deadlines and other things that were like completely changing our chemistry or our alchemy and closing us off to this very solitary consciousness. Everybody's very insular, especially like here in London, where I live, it's just like people just marching down the road with their blinkers on, like, what am I doing? What have I got to do next? What's next on my list for me? No, I can't take this call right now because I'm thinking about what I'm doing, you know. It's all so insular. And unity consciousness, as you know, is the complete opposite of that. So yes, 100% believe and know it to be possible to, you know, to enter new realms and to have new experiences without doing all of the kind of like diligent Kundalini practices and Ascension practices. But I do also believe from my own personal experiences that those things have been very helpful tools for me and have brought me to a place personally that I never imagined being at. So I am an advocate for those things, but I do also think that everybody's journey is just so personal that it's hard to, I would never want to say that this is the way and this is the only way. You know, there's lots of different ways to access it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I think that's so important to listen to your own body and, you know, do what feels right and what makes a difference. Also, just to ask you a little bit more about fasting, there are so many types of fasting. You mentioned juice fasting and how that's alkalinizing. There's intermittent fasting where someone's just not eating maybe from 6 p.m. until 11 a.m. or something like that. There's an eating window. There's also just pure water fasting. There's master cleanse where you have this lemon maple concoction. And there's dry fasting where there's not even water. So have you found that the type of fast someone does is impactful, or is it just kind of do the kind that feels right to you?
I definitely think do the kind of fasting that you're drawn to personally. I mean, when you think of it in an alchemical sense, everything is chemistry. You know, as soon as I take a sip of water, the chemistry of my body alters slightly. As soon as I take a sip of vodka, the chemistry of my body alters slightly. As soon as I drink a glass of green juice, that's going to do something to me. If I you know, specifically felt some like grief in my heart, then I might look into what chemicals are in certain fruits that would maybe help me build more of the comforting hormones so that I can help to let go of some of the grief. Or if I had a lot of like insecurity or fear surrounding maybe money and security in that way, then I would be looking more at like, how can I build the grounding hormones in my body, the security hormones that can actually assist me through and help me to conceive new ideas that will help me along the path. So there are so many fads out there as well. It's kind of overwhelming. And the Bible obviously says about not letting things take you from here to there, like on a whim, you know, just following every little fad, but to be anchored in yourself. So to ask those questions about like, if you're thinking about doing a fast, what do I really want to get from this? Personally, me, not anybody else, not the person who's selling it to me, but me. What's my goal here? You know, and is this right for me, for the level of activity that I have in my day, for my personal hunger levels? You know, somebody who is used to eating 5 meals a day isn't probably going to be able to just go on a hardcore dry fast like overnight. And would they want to? Because that's probably going to actually jar their body into having like a really negative outcome. So it's about being gentle with ourselves and doing what really resonates and feels good personally. Again, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's great. There are, you know, so many different ways to go about it. And I think I've tried all of them, except dry fasting. Haven't done that yet. That one's the next frontier. But yeah, I find that they all bring about transformation in their own way. And one of my very first experiences, which I think people kind of would call it maybe a runner's high. I was on Master Cleanse this is in my 20s, and I had been, I think, 10 days without food, and I was feeling so good and so strong. And I was kickboxing at the time. I was doing cardio kickboxing, and I went to a cardio kickboxing class. 'Cause why not on a 10 days into a 14-day fast? And I got that that runner's high. And I, like you said, I just felt connected to everything. And I felt invincible. I felt strong but gentle at the same time. And I was like, wow, that euphoria, like, this is amazing. I'm gonna
Wow.
fast all the time. I didn't fast all the time, but I did go 14 days on that one. It was so powerful. And that was my first long fast. Yeah. So and I've done that since, and I haven't had that same experience, but certainly I've had other experiences that are just as valuable. And it's fun to experiment and play and see what is your body like? What does your body respond to?
So I've just experimented with juicing so much. I think I am an alchemist in my DNA, because my parents always used to say that when I was a kid, they would just find me mixing stuff, and like I'd get into all kinds of trouble because I would have used the expensive perfumes and this, and just made a huge mess. But I have, yeah, really experimented with my juices, and there's a couple of recipes on my YouTube channel. One of them is a DMT tea that I make from boiling whole bananas with their skins. And that actually draws the tryptophan out of the skins of the bananas. So by drinking that before you go to bed, you're getting like an extra dose of tryptophan, which is one of the precursors to DMT. So I use that as a sacred secretion practice. And I also use beetroot smoothies. I don't love the taste of beetroots on their own, so I use like oranges and ginger sometimes to just make it like a much more palatable flavor. But beetroot is incredible because it actually boosts nitric oxide in the body, and nitric oxide is the molecule of health. When you were talking about your runner's high, I expect what happened on a chemical level is that you had like a major like blast of nitric oxide like bursting through your body, because that again is a catalyst for all of those biochemicals of enlightenment. Anandamide is another one of them, and funnily enough, in Sanskrit the word ananda actually means bliss. And we, secrete that when we're in these really loving moments. So, it's quite fun in a way to kind of get scientific about it and think, oh, how can I boost this, or what can I do to take that? There's a tea that I love, a Japanese tea called ashitaba, which is like a very strong antioxidant. Yeah, lots of different things. They're probably the main two for me, though. The beetroot nitric oxide booster and the DMT tea, they're like my little thing. Love those two.
Okay, great. Do you take them at different times, or at like the same time or the same day, or spread it out?
The tea is for the evening. So, probably an hour or so before you go to bed, have like a nice large mug. Just, so that you're not getting up and down all through the night. If you're like me, you want to give it a bit of time before you go to bed. And then, yeah, with the beetroot nitric oxide booster, I tend to have it at lunchtime. I'll start the day with either a green juice, or I also use the chakra juice that's very well known to a lot of people from the Avatar series. So I don't know if you ever saw that series. It's like a kids series. It's so funny. Where the guru tells the character to drink onion and banana to clear his chakras. And so I probably saw that when I was like 8. And then lo and behold, you know, all these years later, you come back around to it and it's like, oh, wow, onion and bananas, that's like a real thing because of the potassium and the acetic acid in the onions combine to like really help clear all your lymphatic channels. So it really does clear the chakras because obviously the chakras are connected to the glands and the glands are connected to the lymph system. So it's just really allowing like the hormones in each chakra to balance out and to work for our best good.
Wow, I feel like we could do a whole episode just on biohacks for for sacred secretion. It could go on, and I find that fascinating. I do retreats and things with biohackers, and that's always
Wow.
they're always looking for, you know, ways to optimize the body and yeah, so fascinating. And I'd love to continue that, but I also have other things I wanna get into. One of the things that I had mentioned previously that you had talked about the revelations, the 7 chakras, the rainbow, and the 7 candles. Can you describe what that's about?
Yeah, this was big for me, like a huge turning point on my journey and my expanding of consciousness through Christianity, you know, into the rest of the realms of different teachings. So I've written a book, it's called Elevation, The Divine Power of the Human Body, and it's basically a breakdown of all of the symbols in the book of Revelation. But you've got the 4 horses, for example, that are related to the emotional body, the mental body, the physical body, and the spiritual body. And the different scriptures that go with each one of those horses in terms of like how we bridle that and how we you know, basically kind of awaken our own like inner God, if you like, because the book of Revelation is a book of alchemy. There is so many chemical references in there. Once you really dig in, I just couldn't believe it. It's just absolutely fascinating in terms of the 666, you know, the number of the beast, the number of man. That's carbon 666. So 6 neutrons, 6 protons, 6 electrons, that makes carbon. Carbon is the element that's linked to the root chakra. So when we talk about transmuting lead or transmuting coal into a finer essence, we are basically taking that carbon 666, which is related to coal and lead because it's graphite, it's dense, it's heavy. But we need carbon 666 to fuse with other molecules and other atoms to make the more finer chemicals within the body. So the lead into gold is a huge theme in the book of Revelation. It's all about our inner enlightenment. The cube of the New Jerusalem has to do with the cube that becomes the dodecahedron ascension vehicle, which has to do with the renewing of DNA. Because when you see the structure of the sacred geometry of a dodecahedron turning, what you actually have is a double helix, exactly the same as DNA. So what they're describing, or John's describing, or whoever the true author was is describing, is the ascension of DNA, the awakening or activating of like our dormant light codes, dormant brain cells, and just a huge inner awakening. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's very easy to make a video about Revelation being about end times and get billions of views. But if you make a video about Revelations being about your own inner alchemy of ascension, then, you know, there's way more pushback. But again, you know, when you've experienced it firsthand and you just see these things popping off the page, and it's like, oh my gosh, of course, there's nothing else to do but share, because it's what we all need as a collective consciousness, I believe.
Yeah, that I love what you said. And, you know, it's really, I'm hearing you have decoded Revelations and the Bible to some extent. And, you know, it just like a computer coder and programmer, they have to translate that into something that's readable. And that's what you've done. You've taken those codes that you picked up and put them into your books and then shared them with us. So it's so fascinating, all of the different ways that these things can be looked at and viewed and then shared, and also how I wanted to make sure we addressed the mental aspect of it, or the mental emotional aspect, where you know, almost every topic that I had a question on for you, there's some sort of like negative affiliation for someone. Like you just mentioned, the 666 is the carbon, the flower of life, and the dodecahedron, which is part of Metatron's cube. I'm sure you've heard negative press on that, and I've done drawing classes and things, and channeled Metatron, and you know, and then I always got a little bit of pushback for that. But I love that you addressed how it's an integral part of this process. Can you really quickly just give your thoughts on that? And this looks like you've been introduced to that idea.
Yeah, I feel like it's a toughie, because so many of these sacred symbols that are symbols of life, of, you know, all potential, you know, the flower of life, for example, and you know, the swastika. Now, I'm not by any means condoning like any of, you know, what happened, but originally the swastika meant something completely different. You know, it was also a symbol of life. So the demonizing of these sacred symbols, it's just very interesting to me that people will look at something and immediately put their guard up, as so did I, you know, not really that long ago. But yeah, I can't put my finger on whether it's supposed to be that way, because you're only supposed to enter this path by your own volition, by your own seeking to see the truth, or, you know, whether there's a kind of agenda to really stop people from being able to see the truth. I definitely think that comes into it somewhere, but I think it's a little of both. And I think a lot of it's about, you know, what we choose to see. And I mean, the cube of life is a symbol for all the different elements, universal elements in the world. And when you look at the Kaaba that the Muslims have in Mecca, and the way that they walk around it, it's like, it's such a parallel to the book of Revelation, because as the cube again begins to turn, you get the dodecahedron, you get the ascension vehicle, and the dodecahedron is linked with 12 and love and unity and immortality even. So I would just say, you know, for anyone who's interested in symbolism, to take everything they hear with a pinch of salt and to do their own research, because a lot of the times the things that we are told to stay away from, or that definitely mean a specific thing, that's not actually the truth. And that's not to say that they're not being used in a negative way also, but that behind that there is something way more beautiful and way more enlightening than, you know, what's being perceived. And I think, you know, unfortunately bad people do bad things to good people. So, you know, in the same way, there can be a sort of taking the shine off of a symbol that's meant to mean one thing could keep someone trapped in dogma that, you know, it would actually be really sad for them to stay trapped in that dogma, is what I'm trying to say. Not
Yeah.
that any, you know, there's lots of shades of gray, so it's not, I don't really like using the good bad thing, but
Right.
you know.
Yeah, and I love how you keep bringing it back to it's use your own discernment. You know, let yourself, you know, be educate yourself and be your own advisor and get all of the information and figure out how you feel about it. And I think when we do that, we come to our own uh, ideas and conclusions. And then I think all of these symbols as well have multiple dimensions of meaning and experience. And if you think about a symbol, it's flat. When we see it drawn, it's two-dimensional, but some of these symbols are multidimensional. You know, what would it look like if it was three-dimensional or fourth dimensional, or can we even get a concept of, you know, 5 dimensions? And how much might it change and grow if we could conceptualize that? And so I think it is so important not to just like X out a whole body of work or a symbol because somebody has given it a bad meaning, which
Mm,
all too often, yeah, seems to happen.
mm, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to wind it up soon here, but is there anything you'd like to share that maybe I missed, something important, any piece of all of this puzzle that you think would be relevant to, especially to new people that are new to your work?
um Not really. I think like we have definitely covered a lot here, which is lovely. Um, just yeah, that everybody's path is so different and so individual. You know, there are videos on my YouTube channel going back to, you know, the very beginning and the very basic symbols of what the sacred secretion means in the Bible, and you know, really breaking it down in black and white to make it very digestible. And then the books, you know, the God design is more about how the sacred secretion shows itself in different traditions around the world. And the cell of life is more about the specifics of the regeneration and, you know, how that occurs. And the elevation is a slightly, you know, different vibe because, you know, it's more about translating that specific book and kind of not leaving any stone unturned in that way. But yeah, there's lots out there, so you know, if you're interested, just go dig in, and it's a very interesting journey for sure.
Indeed. And so if someone is listening to this, they're new to your work and they think, well, I want to go read all of your books. Do you have an order or a best practice for doing that? And certainly your videos on YouTube as well. There's a wealth, an abundance of information there.
Yeah, I mean, I've laid out the homepage of the YouTube channel so that you can kind of get a holistic view of the sacred secretion, you know, in line with the Kundalini rising. So there's a mixture of old and new videos there. Um, the books don't really go in a specific order, but I'd say that the most accessible or like easier reads for someone who's brand new would probably be the God design, um, or this new one, the sacred secretion. I've tried to really like just bring in a lot of different elements and again make it kind of snappy but insightful, like so that people kind of don't get lost in all of, the deep symbols and alchemy of it all, but they can see for themselves, okay, yeah, there is a parallel there, and that's something I might look into, for myself further.
Okay, great. And the name of your YouTube channel?
It's just my name, Kelly Marie Kerr.
Okay, Kelly, and I of course will link that in the show notes, and as well as your website, so people can find your books and all of your offerings. It has been so wonderful to have you on, Kelly Marie, and get to understand your work a little bit better. I still feel like I've only scratched the surface because there's so much, and yet it's such a fun topic of conversation that I feel like could just go on and on and on. So maybe we'll have you back in the future when I have some more in-depth, like next level questions, and we can have another conversation if you're up for that.
Definitely.
Wonderful. And just again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. And to the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're interested in Kelly Marie Kerr's body of work, go to the show notes and I will have links there. And enjoy. Thank you for joining us, and namaste.
Thank you very much.